So here's a random game that I played a tons back in the day, and I recently got around to play again because I just felt like it. Raptor, Call of the Shadows. A vertical scrolling shooter released in 1994 courtesy of Apogee Software and Cygnus Studios. Like a good number of games released by Apogee during its prime days, Raptor Call of the Shadow came in both shareware versions with one 9-level campaign and full complete registered versions with 3 9-level campaigns, and a couple more goodies you couldn't get in the shareware version, but that's jumping ahead here. For the purposes of this video, we'll be looking at an emulated version of the original 1994 MS-DOS release, which is currently available on Steam as either a standalone or as part of the 3D Realms Anthology digital compilation. There's also an updated version from .mu and Mountain King that works natively under Windows and has a couple additional options like screen resolutions and the implementation of a high-res filter, but is marred by overly sensitive analog stick controls, no D-pad support, and looping wave files for music. Issues that the DOS original do not have, but I digress. In Raptor Call of the Shadow, you are a pilot who flies a Raptor class fighter, and your main goal is to go about blowing up tons of stuff and get paid for it. The overall story of Raptor is largely irrelevant, so much so that even the help screen depicting said story just skims over it. The important bits to know is that you blow stuff up, you get paid, you stop by Harry's Emporium and buy a bunch of stuff to upgrade your ship's capabilities so that you could blow more stuff up. It's a concept that's simple, straight to the point, nothing too taxing on the brain, and ultimately very gratifying. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Upon starting a new game, you'll be asked to enter a name, a call sign, and choose from one of 4 mugshots to represent your pilot. This information is largely for the purposes of saving your progress in Raptor. Once that's done and you've picked one of 3 skill settings, or the training mode if you prefer, you'll end up in the hangar, where you can either start your destructive wares in 3 separate campaigns spanning 9 levels each, save your progress, or go to the shop to buy or sell parts for your fighter craft. You begin the game with a paltry amount of change, but can always earn more by destroying ships and scenery, as well as collecting bounty dropped by certain attacking ships, cargo transports, or storage modules. Now Raptor works like any other shoot 'em up. You fly a ship around, you blow stuff up. If it moves, shoot it. If it shoots, kill it. Even if it's just there, just blow the bastard up and be done with it. Not only can you destroy enemy ships and ground targets, but also stationary bits like buildings, warehouses, bolts, even tractors and farming equipment. Whatever you can shoot, you can blow up and earn a little cash. And cash is something you need for maintenance and stuff because your Raptor isn't a one-hit kill wonder, but a reinforced killing machine that can take a beating. So you don't have to worry about taking a little heat while you're blowing stuff up, so long as you don't take too much of it, because once your ship goes bye-bye, so does your fortunes and so does your life. Game over. Hope you have a save file handy, because if not, well, that's your own fault now, isn't it? Like any traditional vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, a typical Raptor level ends when you reach the end boss and you destroy it, at which point you return to the hangar to do what you usually do here. Eventually, you'll want to buy upgrades, which includes hull repair, additional layers of shielding for extra protection, and of course, weapons. There are more than a dozen weapons, and each one has their own specific properties. Some hit only aerial targets, some only hit ground targets. You have a turret that automatically fires at the closest target, and then you have frickin' laser beams of death and destruction. All of these weapons have their pros and cons, but with a couple exceptions, you could only use one weapon at a time. So if you have a bunch of missile types, you'll need to cycle through your arsenal to pick out the right weapon for the right situation. But really, once you have the turret and the lasers, everything else is just there to sell off for more cash. Of course, considering their high price point, it's going to be a while before you can eventually afford the good stuff. Of course, you have the option to control the action with either the keyboard, the mouse, or joystick or gamepad if you have one of those laying around, which these days would be somewhat likely and perhaps even recommended. Playing Raptor with the keyboard is workable but not desirable, and while mouse control over your ship feels a bit weird, it does technically work, and well enough actually, but ultimately the mouse is best served pointing and clicking on things in the hangar. So that leaves gamepad support, and since I'm playing the Steam release of the original 94 version, there's partial support for an Xbox 360 controller if you have one of those laying around. And control in this regard works smoothly. Response time is quick, ship moves about at a decent speed, cycling through weapons is easy and straightforward. There's so many ways you can screw up controls in a scrolling shooter, and Raptor does none of that. which is good because you need a firm hand on your ship if you're going to somewhat survive it, which is why the later Windows port falters since the analog controls in that version feels way too sensitive and makes your ship hard to control at times. Now in a case like this, the D-pad would offer more precise control, kinda sort of, over your spacecraft, except the D-pad in the Windows version doesn't work, and it's for this reason why I stick with the DOS original. It simply works better here. And when control works better, then the whole game is better because you're left to fuss over dodging enemies and their weapons in addition to, well, all the mass destruction that you'll eventually lay waste to. Raptor isn't necessarily fast-paced, and indeed, once you've acquired the best weapons in the game, the challenge is almost minimal, even on the highest of skill settings and the later of levels. But you'll have to work your way up because the good stuff costs a lot of money. That takes time to accumulate, even with some sneaky methods that you could use to cheat the system somewhat. But until then, you'll be quite busy for the long haul, and in terms of pointless destruction, there's a bit of a gratification that comes along with messing up someone's farmland for a few bucks. Though not the flashiest looking game, Raptor is still a pretty slick looking shooter with some smooth scrolling, some nice vibrant terrain, a wide variety of sharp looking enemy ships with some fine details, and even the inclusions of the little things like that tractor, or that speedboat, or those space domes. All things you could destroy to your heart's content, and watching things explode is a beautiful sight indeed. Unless it's your own ship, then it's not so beautiful, but at least when you go down in style and in grand fashion. Explosions make everything better, and the little cinematics that play at times, as well as the various in-between stuff like the hangar bay or the pilot generator bits, are also well done and add a bit of an overall grit to Raptor's world. The game runs smoothly enough these days, and again, it's not a fast-paced or a flashy little game, but it is a nice looking game, especially when everything is blowing up around you. Or in front of you, that works too. And then we get the sound, and this is where the mileage may vary a bit. The sound effects comprise lots of gunfire and explosion, and it all sounds great. The sample rate might sound a bit messy at times, but never to the point of being total ear rape. Nonetheless, you have some good quality sound here in regards to the sound effects. On the flip side, Raptor only has a handful of music tracks that play over the course of 3 campaigns spanning 27 levels, and they're not high-octane, fast-paced action pieces, but rather more easy listening melodies that might differ in tone depending on the level. I personally like the tunes. It's a different style from what you'd normally associate with a shmup, but maybe something with a little more energy might be preferable to some. The quality of the tunes sound fine, if not a bit tinny with the old ad-lib Sound Blaster setup, and I'd imagine the quality would be a bit better with one of those rolling things if you really need one of those in your life. Which, by the way, I never did. I still don't, but whatever floats your boat. Overall, Raptor Call of the Shadow is a thoroughly satisfying shooter that does what it does very well, and that is provide players with the means and tools to go out and blow up as much crap as they can shoot down, while rewarding them with the income to build their spacecraft into a virtual flying WMD so they could do more of the blowing up of stuff. It is simple enough for beginners to pick up and get a grasp of the fundamentals, but has just enough depth and challenge to keep some of the more hardened players around for a bit. The DOS original is the preferred iteration of play, whether it's a boxed version on a vintage DOS machine or through a DOS box emulated format, but whatever the case may be, Raptor is pure explosive bliss in a neat shareware package. If you like blowing things up, this game has stuff to blow up. It's loads of fun, it's a great game, and a fair share of explosions. That's a thumbs up in my book.